Welcome back to my garden here at Klein Cottage in the autumn. I love this time of year. All the colours are beginning to merge together. It's almost as though somebody's taken a great big paintbrush, must have been Mother Nature, and swished it across the whole scene. And yet, here and there are these blobs of brilliant colour, which let you know that autumn is well and truly here. On the edge of a brick garden, the change in tree colour is heralding the new season. This is my beautiful bird cherry, Prunus padus colorata. It was the very first tree in the whole garden to come into leaf in the spring and then to come into flower soon afterwards. And very appropriately, aptly I suppose, it's the very first tree to start losing its leaves now in the autumn. And as they fall to the path and you walk along, they start to crunch. It's just such a beautiful sight. There's something so romantic about autumn and autumn colour, and yet, at the same time, something very melancholy. Look at this. Talk about a happy accident. The leaves from this have fallen down, and now they've settled on the leaves of this aconite. How beautiful. But the plants above all others, which really let you know what time of year we've reached, are the grasses. They're everywhere. Earlier in the summer, you hardly notice them at all, but now it's their time. There's so much to say about grasses, and we'll come back to them later, but first, there's a job I've been wanting to do for ages. Pigeons serenading me again. So this is a very exciting moment because way back in the spring I took some basil cuttings from this beautiful orange dahlia. To take the basil cuttings I used my sharp knife to detach healthy young shoots, making slanted cuts almost down to the tuber. Then I pushed them into a pot of compost that contained sterilised loam and loads of grit for good drainage. 5 out of 6 of them have rooted, so that's not a bad success rate. And really I should have potted them on by now. But I've been waiting for you to come back because I was so excited to see these roots. So when I ease this out of here, if you come right down this stem you can see where I cut it, and then here it started to make a tuber. It's great, and they're already starting to make buds. Now normally when you take cuttings, the object of the exercise is to make as many plants as you can. So you'd pull them apart, give them individual pots and grow them on like that. But I've left it quite late, so I'm not going to separate them. I'll simply pot them as they are into a big clay pot so they can grow on together. I'm going to put just a couple of crocked broken plant pots into the bottom there, and that's just to help drainage and make sure the compost doesn't fall out of the bottom of there. And I want loads of this in here first. So this is good potting compost, because they're still going to want to carry on feeding, because that's going to make those plants grow big and strong. Let's try this in there. So you want the top of that pot, and it would be the base of your cutting where it just joins the compost, that you want to be on exactly the same level as the compost you're filling in with. I think that's going to be just about it. Make sure it's nice and firm, and then top it up a bit. That compost is nice and damp, but I'll be watering these regularly, and then put some grit over the surface of that. I like that sound. Not as nice as the leaves on the path, but still a bit of a crunch. If you need to pot on your rooted cuttings, use crocks to help drainage in clay pots. Use a good quality potting compost and water regularly. Perfect kind of weather for potting up dahlias. A really beautiful sunny day. Coming up, a tuber of another kind is ready to make an appearance. The arrival of autumn brings with it an abundance of delicious edibles, ripe for harvest, and I'm dying to get on with it. I suppose you could call this the productive hub of the entire garden. It's my vegetable garden, and we've grown all sorts of different things in here. But we did an experiment here last year. We used part of the veg plot to store our dahlia tubers. It's a way of overwintering them. Heaped lots of soil on top of them, and they got through the winter brilliantly. The time came for them to make way for my seed potatoes, so I dug up all the dahlias and potted them up. And it's those very dahlias which you can see all around the garden now. But a funny thing happened when we were potting up our dahlias. We put them all in separate pots after we dug up these tubers. But in this one, there must have been a rogue teeny potato from the year before, because when I looked in the top of the pot, I could see this green growth, and then, look, it's full of potatoes. They're both tubers, and they seem to get on very well, but I wouldn't recommend it as a growing method. A bit earlier too, I'd also planted up potatoes in a great big pot. Because of course, if you haven't got a garden, you can still grow your own spuds. Well, in the summer, when they were ready, I turned the whole pot over. And the crop was so bountiful, it was brilliant. I might even find a few more in here. But now it's time to really go to town and harvest these potatoes that are in the ground, and I can't wait to see. There's something very, very exciting about it. You've seen all this green growth come up, it's all died down, and underneath the ground is where the treasure lies. Look at that. That pheasant that absolutely terrorised the garden and everything in it in the spring is down there. We've just started putting bird food out again, so I think immediately he's moved back. Cheeky thing. How do you tell when your potatoes are ready for harvesting? When it comes to main crop potatoes, you wait for the haulms to die down. That's these dead stems. And you know then that your potatoes aren't going to grow anymore. So now is the time to harvest them, and this is the perfect day. You want it to be dry because you're just going to leave them on top of the soil for a little bit before you store them. So I'm going to plunge this fork. Which one shall we start with? I think there are a few here from, oh yeah. Here's the first of them. I think it's really lovely harvest. You know, when you start literally seeing the fruits of your labour, or at least the potatoes. The potatoes of your labour. Here we go. Oh dear. You always do it with one or two of these. It's only a flesh wound though. Yeah, if we clean it, I reckon that's part of mash for tea. Now, I can take all these out, leave them on the surface of the soil and let them dry out in this lovely sunshine. Turn them over a little bit, and when they're perfectly dry I can put them into a paper bag and store them. But if you want to, you can just leave them in the ground, because the earth itself is brilliant insulation, as long as no light gets to them, because then they turn green and they're poisonous. But if it's getting really, really cold and frost is threatening, then you can pile soil upon the top of them, or just lift them then and take them indoors. You'll know your spuds are ready for harvesting when the stems or haulms have died down. Carefully dig them up with a fork. Leave them on the surface to dry out, and always store them away from sunlight, perhaps in a thick paper bag. My spuds sorted, there's something else in need of attention. Oh dear, what's happening? Not only has something happened to my courgettes, but it's raining too. Never mind. These courgettes have been brilliant. We put these in sort of May time, and we've been cropping them since midsummer. And they're still going strong. Not quite as strong as they were, but a couple of these fruits have gone rotten at the end, and I'm going to actually cut them off. But another thing has happened to these. Although the leaves at this end are really bright green and still got that lovely marbling on them, at the back of the plants, the foliage looks completely white. Very ornamental, but in actual fact, it's a sign of mildew. And it's all down to sort of uneven watering conditions. And of course, we've had very, very dry weather, and now we've got rain. It's an aesthetic thing. It doesn't affect the crop at all. Well, I want to take some of these leaves off because I really think it's going to help those fruit ripen. And of course, the autumn's progressing. There's less and less daylight. I can come right down to the main stem. Use sharp secateurs. That's it. I think I'm really going to go to town on this plant because it's also exposing the growing tip of the plant. And you can see down here all these new baby courgettes just coming along brilliantly. Timber. One more here. See, it's even affected the stalk on this one, but it hasn't affected the fruit. Whilst my courgettes live on to fight another day, I must bid a sad farewell to one of my garden's oldest inhabitants. Oh, this is my lovely greenhouse. It's grown so many plants, thousands and thousands of them in its time. But I'm going to say goodbye to it because I got a brand new one. A couple of things, though, are left behind. These Nicotiana that have seeded themselves into the bench. There's a bit of love in the mist in the middle here too. And I'm definitely going to leave these. I can't possibly take this down until I've saved some seed from them. This is Nicotiana Langsdorffii with these long lime green bells. And this is its close cousin. It's called Mutabilis because the flowers change from white to pink. There's a bee in here, just doing its work as we speak, so even more seeds. I'd be really, really sad to take this down, but it's going to be going to a good home. It's been a real friend. But I can't deny there's consolation in a younger model. Come on, come and have a look. Nice in here, isn't it? I think it's lovely, and having this new greenhouse gives me an opportunity to bring a few things across from the old greenhouse. The tomatoes have been so prolific, and autumn's luscious bounty continues outside. Well, these strange-looking containers are actually cattle troughs, and they are perfect, especially for things that love sunshine. So the very first crop we've grown in here are squashes and pumpkins. So these are just about ready to harvest. We sowed the seed for these on its side, because you do that with all cucurbit seed, it stops it from rotting, way back, probably April or so, and they'd already made good plants by the end of May. And we sowed 2 varieties. This is one called Uchiki Kuri. It's a Japanese squash. So squashes belong to the same family as the courgettes, as pumpkins, gourds. They're all cucurbits, and cucumbers too, although I wouldn't grow my cucumbers out here. So look at this gorgeous crown prince. It's a very beautiful thing as well as being delicious. You can see that it's made all this extension growth. In fact, it's been lolling around in this chair for ages. And what I want to do is take some of that off, because the plant is still going to expend loads of energy into trying to make those shoots longer and longer. And I don't want it to do that. I want it to concentrate on ripening this fruit. All you've got to do is be very, very careful that you cut the right stems. So I think this is where this plant's coming from. So if I cut back here, so I think that's most of that. No. That's enough. Right. And that means also that the sun can really get at this and ripen it. Have you seen what I've done under these? I've put, can you see under there's a stone, just to make some sort of separation between the soil and the fruit itself. It's especially if the soil is very damp or slugs are a real problem, it helps with that. So I'm going to harvest this lovely Uchiki Kuri. But the interesting thing about this one is, here's the stem which has made this lovely squash. But then if you go further down the stem, there's another one. So I obviously hadn't cut the end back, and meanwhile it's decided to have a baby and make an extra one. So I think we'll have to harvest them both, because I will have cut the stem there. And what you do when you're harvesting any squash or pumpkins, don't cut this supporting stem that goes directly into the fruit, because if you do, it can rot during the winter and go right back into the inside of the fruit. So I'm going to separate it first of all from the plant. Oh! And now I've got that stem, and I'm going to make a little sort of T-junction here. There and there. And that means that I can come along here, because this is totally detached now. There, cut, here. So, do a bit of weightlifting, I think. It's so gorgeous and it's so autumnal. To harvest pumpkins and squash, don't cut the supporting stem. Instead, create a T-bar shape to prevent rot. Well, you might be wondering what this strange organism is that's protruding from my sweet corn. It's very, very simple. It's actually a crisp packet. It's not just any old crisp either. This is chili flavour, and the reason it's growing from this sweet corn is to deter the deer that were intent on eating them. So if I take it off, you can see the damage they've started to do. And so far, it's really worked. Corn is just such a lovely plant to grow. It's a grass of sorts, a kind of cereal. People suggest that you plant it in blocks because you get good pollination in that way. What happens is that these up here, you can see the pollen on that. That's the male flower, and that pollen falls down onto these tassels. These are the female flower. This is a sort of ovary, if you like, and this is where that corn is made. When they're really, really brown, you can peel the outside away and drop them into a pan of boiling water with a bit of salt in it. And they only take about less than 10 minutes to cook. Take them out and smother them Not in chili crisps, but loads and loads, lashings of butter. Back you go. These gorgeous edibles aren't the only thing to shine this season. Next, it's grass in all its autumnal glory. It's in the autumn that one group of plants begins to take over the limelight. It's at this time of year that we really begin to notice grasses. Walk along any road verge, under any hedgerow, and there they are, with their biscuity coloured stems and their beautiful, soft, wafting seed heads. They're an incredibly diverse group of plants too, mainly because they've evolved to suit every situation. You get grasses that thrive on the top of mountains, right down into bogs, by the seashore, absolutely everywhere. They cover about 2/5 of the world's surface. You couldn't be more successful than that. For humankind, they're extremely important. I mean, where would you be for your daily bread without them? At one time, the only grass we'd ever see in our gardens would have been the lawn, for kids to play on or to set off our beautiful borders with this green swathe. But times are changing. Over the last few decades, grasses have really gained in popularity as an ornamental feature in our garden. They bring something that no other plant can. This lovely softness, this waftiness, this sound, and the feel of the wind, especially the autumn breeze, running through them and creating a whole new atmosphere. Back at Glebe Cottage, our diverse conditions allow for all manner of grasses to thrive. In some places it's very sunny, and in some it's really, really well drained, but in others it's damp, and others shady, and it means I can grow a huge range of different grasses. When we're choosing grasses, it's vital to choose something which is going to thrive in the situation we want to put it in. And we seem to have got it right when we planted these. These Millennias absolutely love this corner. So when I was planting these beds in the first place, I thought, I don't really need great big grasses in here, but I do love Millennias and they love our damp, heavy soil. So I started off with this one. This is one called Edith Dudsus. And see how refined it is. It's got these long, narrow blades and it's very upright, very erect too. And it's the perfect grass if you want to bring a Millennia into your garden at this time of year. All these beautiful inflorescences are purpley blue, but later on the whole thing will go completely golden. They're just delightful. This grass positively twinkles, doesn't it? With the light coming through its seed heads. It's got lots of common names, this. It's called pheasant grass. It's extremely popular here and really does very, very well. Seeds itself all over the place. And it's an evergreen grass. So once these flowers and seed heads have gone, this lovely mound of beautiful foliage will remain. And one of the great things about it is that if you want more, you can grow it very, very simply from seed. And collecting it couldn't be easier. It's really straightforward. Each of these seed heads, although you can hardly see it at this stage, contains a whole lot of seed. So all you do is run your finger and thumb right along one of these. And you can actually feel it falling off into your hand. bring with you an envelope, a paper bag, whatever it is, and just drop that seed into the bag. I want some more. It's not going to spoil the grass at all, but it is going to give me loads of new plants. Some people think that grasses are no good for wildlife, but although their flowers aren't pollinated by insects, they're wind pollinated, the pollen flies for miles. Nonetheless, particularly at this time of year in the autumn, they provide homes, venues for all sorts of creatures. Look at this spider on its web here. It's going to eat round this bit of leaf that's fallen on the top of it so it falls through, and then it'll re-sow it and put it back together. And it's time for me to sow my grass seed. So all I've got is just regular seed compost in a half seed tray, because I think these are the best things. You don't get too many seedlings then if you use a full-size tray, but you can use a pot, anything at all. Winnowing is something you associate with people who have been reaping corn, separating the grain from the chaff, but you have to do it with your seeds as well. You have to make sure that they're as clean as can be. So if I tip this out, I've got loads of seed, but I've also got some dross, some debris. So that's from that seed head. But the seed is heavier than all that stuff it was sort of wrapped up in. So all you do is just blow it away, and you're left with the seed, lots and lots of it, and then you can sow it. A pinch at a time, just slightly above the surface of the compost, around the edge, and then into the middle. We want these all to grow up and have a bit of space to develop before they get pricked out and potted separately. And that's it really, so some grit on the top, both to hold the seed in place and just try and put any weeds off. She's seen it all before, haven't you? But it's very nice to have your company. And then just cover the whole surface of the compost with grit. So easy, so straightforward. And those will germinate very, very rapidly within a few weeks or so. If you want to give it a go, blow the dross away from your seed, then sow it on the surface of seed compost, and make sure you give each seed plenty of space to flourish. And here are some I prepared earlier. I think Hacknaclough has to be my favourite, but this is a close second, this Nasala tenuissima. And I'm really looking forward to putting these little plants in that we've grown from seed. Eventually they'll waft, just like this. So we've got the wafty weather, we've got the wafty grasses. I want to add to this container. They'll grow and eventually they'll cascade over the edge of this pot. Each of these came from one seed and they're really looking quite dapper now. Just imagine the effect that you can create with lots of plants. And if I turf one of them out, look at that, really well rooted. Just ideal. That's the best stage to be planting these. They're not pot bound, the roots haven't gone round and round. Just push it in. Not adding anything extra to the compost in here. It's perfect. I mean, when we planted this, we didn't improve the compost in any way. It was fine. We just topped it all up. And grasses will grow happily in that sort of situation. At the moment, these look like separate entities, but eventually, and it won't take them very long before they all start to mix and mingle. One more down here. I think that looks really quite nice, and it'll look even better in a few weeks. Whilst my grasses are pretty low maintenance, some residents of the garden require a little more TLC. Just a few days ago, this dahlia was looking absolutely magnificent. It was full of these great big sort of dark red chocolatey blooms, but now it's looking decidedly dishevelled. And that's because I haven't deadheaded it, so I want to do that now. Really vitally important, especially with something like this, where each bloom sort of makes a statement, to take these down, right down to the next little side shoot where you can see that coming out, and where there's a bud, another bud here on the top of that one. So in a case like that, you come right down that stem until you bump into that bud and then snip it off. And always use sharp secateurs or really good scissors. But how do you tell the difference between a spent flower and a bud? It's really quite straightforward. So here's a really good example of a bud that's just about to open. You can almost see the colour of the petals here. It's round, it's positively spherical, and it's fat. And it's quite sort of dry. On the other hand, this one, especially if I take these petals off so you can really see, it's not just the fact that it's got a few dead petals there, but if you push it, it's really squidgy. And that's because all those leftover petals inside are just on their way out. So I want to take that one off. The whole object of the exercise is to remove these unsightly heads and just make absolutely sure that every one of these buds which are just coming through get an opportunity to be just as good as the ones that were here last week. I apologise for my secateurs. They're quite squeaky, but they are very sharp. When individual dahlia flowers are on their way out, find the squidgy spent buds and cut the stems where another bud is emerging. And always use sharp secateurs. Autumn can bring with it a lot of goodbyes, but sometimes you get a lovely hello. Isn't this just magnificent? A couple of months ago you could hardly see anything at all. And then gradually these shoots came up. But once they get going, then they absolutely zoom. And this is a hedychium. It's a hedychium called Tara. And the common name for them is ginger lily, because they're very closely related to the ginger, the root ginger that we use in our cooking. In fact, you can actually grow those roots, put them into a pot, and you'll get a plant not as magnificent as this, but one with these glorious leaves. But with this one, it's the flower, isn't it, that really, turns you on. They're all just waiting to open. But this was the first. That's not the only thing that's looking beautiful at the moment. Just look at this lovely grass. This is Miscanthus sinensis and it's called flamingo, that's its variety. And it has these soft pinky plumes. It's very, very graceful grass, I think. Quite fine blades too. So the whole effect is quite shimmery when it's all in flower like this. This Miscanthus is at the height of its beauty during the autumn. But when it changes and these stems become straw-coloured and these flower heads, the old inflorescences, actually become very fluffy and soft. Don't chop it down, because it's just as beautiful then, and it will continue right the way through the winter. Grasses are so diverse. I don't know how any garden could be without them. Next, how to use grasses to bring different textures to your seasonal displays. Everywhere you look, there are signs of the changing season. I mean, this lovely Cercidiphyllum here, its leaves are golden already. You can see through the branches too. And what you can't see is what I can smell. I can detect this gorgeous aroma. It's positively delicious. It sort of smells of burnt sugar, and it's everywhere in the air. And this lovely cornice that was filled with these big white bracts with tiny flowers in the middle. All those bracts have gone, and in their place are these beautiful berries. Green at first, but now actually turning red. Autumn's well and truly here. And I want to celebrate its arrival with a dark and moody display. This is the season when this magnificent plant really comes into its own. It's called Angelica gigas. It's from Asia, where it grows in woodlands. Don't you just love the way that these flowers just make these almost spheres? And that means that every single one of these tiny florets which compose every flower head can get pollinated easily. And this plant is pollinated mainly by wasps. Now, don't be put off at all. Wasps are a really important part of the whole system in the garden. They'll kill flies, they'll take caterpillars, aphids, all sorts of things. I've chosen this plant to play the sort of central role in this planting I'm going to do in this great big tub. It's actually a water butt, but inside it is a big tree pot full of great compost. And I love that colour actually, with this dark, muted kind of crimson. So as well as this gorgeous Angelica, I'm going to use some grasses. This is the first one. People call it blood grass. Its real name is Imperator cylindrica rubra. And I think it's ideal to go around the base of this plant. Yeah. Grasses are great for adding different textures to a display. And this next one will work perfectly alongside the bloodgrass. Some more grassage. This is east meets west. This is a lovely North American grass. It's called switchgrass. It's Panicum virgatum, and this variety is called Shenandoah or Shenandoah. I adore these grasses at this time of year because it's now that you get these tiny twinkling sort of seed heads on it, and then all the leaves turn from very glaucous bluey green, tipped with red and crimson. It's going to go beautifully with that Angelica, I think. Yeah. Can you see that? Decent root there. I don't really need to take any of it out at all. It's going to settle in beautifully. So I'm going to put this one right in the front. Look at those colours together, aren't they just right? Yeah, you couldn't have painted it, could you? Now from a bloodgrass. This grass, I've never ever seen it flower. You grow it for its foliage, and this is how it spreads. It just sends these little rhizomes under the ground and up it'll come. This switchgrass is very light and airy. It never takes over. It really does mingle well. I think we'll have that one on this side. So another Imperator in that side, and then another of these lovely switchgrasses. Now I'm grasping it around the base of the stems. I won't do it any harm at all, and it means I can ensure when I put it in here that it's at exactly the right level. Whether you're planting in a pot or into the ground, You always try and ensure that the compost at the top of the pot is level with the ground around it, or in this case, the rest of the compost. The colour here is very restricted, so when you're standing at the lower level, you'll look through this, you'll see these gorgeous glowing rudbeckias, and then the cotinus, which picks up the colour in here too. It really is a lovely autumn pot. One of my very favourite things about this time of year is getting to do my food shopping in my own back garden. I think there's enough for you too. It's pretty heavy and a bit of autumn sunshine. It's beautiful. So welcome to my harvest festival. This represents a whole load of the crops that we're just picking at the moment. And this is the peak time really for harvesting all sorts of things. Our gourds have ripened beautifully. We've got courgettes, masses of tomatoes. We've dug out potatoes. And here is some passata that Neil made from all those pans of little tomatoes. Next time, I'll be exploring the magic of bulbs. How is that for perfection? This tall stem and this great white chalice. And showing you a family of flowering plants that no autumn garden should be without. Salvias. Can't wait to welcome you back to Glebe Cottage next time, but bye for now.
And Carol's back again next Thursday at 7. She was the royal refugee with a shattered childhood. Marina of Greece, the Forgotten Royal, is brand new Saturday at 8. And it's the Grand Dame of Luxury Heritage Trains next as Bill Nighy takes us on one of the world's most scenic railway journeys. The new series continues.